Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Laina.
Welcome to our June 9th, 2021 gathering, Ascension with A Course in Miracles. I'm so excited to have you all here.
Woo woo!
Woo-woo. Lisa, how are you? How is your mom?
I'm doing well. Mom is still in decline, and I'm going to be on mute because I just saw the nurse pull up to bathe her today. But I'm listening.
Ah, well, that is so wonderful that you are able to be with your mom at this time of transition. And
yes, I'm grateful.
So many souls that are transitioning. They're transitioning now and are going to accelerate their transitioning as the planet continues its ascension path. So it's amazing times, amazing times. So let's give it another minute or two and wait for the rest of our friends to join us. Actually, what I'm going to do, let's see there. All right, Vern, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Excellent. Excellent. And I sent you a text. Make sure.
I got that, and he's out of town until next week sometime, but as soon as he gets back in, we'll make it happen.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
And you and I need to make some things happen. And
absolutely.
Dondra, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Excellent. Good. Well, I know there's a few people more that are going to join us, but let's get started because today I have another jam-packed potential for this conversation here with really beautiful, powerful, incredible information that the Course wants us to receive. And as you know, what the Course wants us to really get is how powerful we are. To accept how powerful we are, we have to train our mind into two things. One, acceptance of that power, which means we have to let go of all of our resistance to that power. We have to train the mind and unlearn what disempowers us. So there's that one piece is learning how we got disempowered and realizing that we are empowered. The other one is, what the heck do we do with that power? Because it's not about realizing we're powerful and just sitting twiddling our thumbs with that power. There is something specific that we are to do with that power. And you know, Vern, you've mentioned a couple of times action, and I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody so that there's no background noise, but you've mentioned action before. And the Course does speak of action, but it speaks more of beingness. We have to be the love that is going to go into action. You cannot skip the part of being what you are, with awareness of what you are, with clarity of who you are, with purpose of why you are here. If you are not clear about who you are, action is going to create more of the problems that have gotten us to where we are now. So I went through the Course and I was looking at I forget what that's called, concordance, I think it is. And I looked into how many times does the Course mention the word action and how many times does it mention beingness. So it mentions action 10 times, only 10 times in that big Course, but it speaks of beingness 388 times. So if we don't get the beingness part accurate, the action is going to keep yielding the exact same things that it has yielded until now. And I want to welcome Kathy Stringer. So good to see you here. Can
I ask a question, Laina?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I didn't hear that one part that blew me away, that statistic, the 10 times with action and 388 with beingness. How did you get those numbers?
From a concordance that lists all the words. Very cool. It's a book that gives you every single number of times a word is used in a book.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. Let me see. It's not handy enough for me to grab it. You know what? It bears me grabbing it. Hold on.
While we're waiting, hi Kathy, it's Jody.
Hey, isn't that funny? We were just talking last night. Good to see
I know.
Actually, for me to show it to you, I have to move my laptop because it's so big that I use it as part of my stand that gets the laptop at the perfect height. So this massive book, the Concordance of A Course in Miracles, see that big old book, tons of pages, breaks down every single word that is in the course. And of course, it tells you where to go. So I looked into a couple of the words for about action, and we're going to read a section about that today. So if you have your Course in Miracles book,
Laina, Laina, this is Vern. Can I just make one point too as we're moving?
Sure,
moving through this,
absolutely.
what I came across the other day, because we've been talking about action and the term that I came across is minimal necessary force. Minimal necessary force. So if you're taking action, and I mean physical action of some type, it should be minimal necessary force. And that's helped me quite a bit, getting clearer about what I can do or what I don't do and how I do or what I don't do. I mean, you got to be in the right resonance before you take action. But when you take action, if force is involved of some type, it's got to be the minimal necessary force. And that's for me, that's been a good guide as I've been looking through the things I might have to, actions that might be required of me as I move forward. So just wanted to share that real quick as you're on the topic.
That's excellent. And we can say the same thing with our mind. Look at how many times in our mind we get very mentally aggressive. We need to utilize minimum force, the absolute minimum necessary. Your mind starts yakking at you, if that ego goes crazy in judgment and in self-loathing, in shaming and guilting, take action to say, stop that. I love myself too much to allow that level of force in my mind. We are powerful beings, and our power is like water. It is meant to flow. It doesn't stay contained, it spreads. So we have an innate power within us that we're learning to harness, we're learning to utilize, but we cannot utilize it appropriately if we don't flow with it. And every time force is required is literally a going against the flow. You've got to for one being who is in flow with love, to take action against one who may not be as loving, you need to go upstream, as Abraham Hicks says, or as we look in our chart, you need to go down. You need to lower your frequency, or not lower your you need to enter into the realm of lower frequency, which means you have to densify yourself at to a certain extent, because you've got to see that there is another. So the mind is already looking at separation. There's another one that I've got to now deal with. So thank you for sharing that. In physical action, in mental action, it's the exact same thing. Basically, there are two expressions of the same thing, equals MC squared. So it's all the same thing. So if you've got your Course in Miracles book, and I use the 3rd edition, we are at the very beginning of the book. We're in the text, and we're going to be in the very first chapter. So this is foundational information from the course. If you have the 3rd edition, you're going to be on page 13. And if you don't have the 3rd edition, you're in chapter 1. Well, we're all in chapter 1, which is the meaning of miracles. Course in Miracles is a course to train our minds to shift perception to activate miracles. And a miracle is nothing more that instead of looking at something from love or from fear, you shift into love. Looking at it from judgment, you shift into appreciation. Looking at it from insanity, you shift into clarity. Looking at something that is unreal, and you shift into the clarity of the reality that is there. So the meaning of miracles, this first chapter, is crucial that everybody that becomes a student of the course needs to understand what is stated in there. We are going to be looking at the section is section number 6, which is called the illusion of needs. And this particular section, I'm going to tell you, and Kathy, I don't know how familiar you are with the course, so give me a sense of your understanding of the course, because here I speak very very broadly about the biggest aspect that the course wants us to understand, but I can always, if I know if somebody maybe is a little new, or I can break it down so that it's a little bit more understandable. So tell me, where are you in that
Thank you
continuum?
for asking. I'm definitely new. I'm doing the workbook, so I'm on lesson 10.
Okay.
So I've done 10 days of it, and that's really all I've done so far.
Okay, perfect. But you have been around this conversation for a very long time, so a lot of the terms that we're going to use will not be unfamiliar, but maybe some of the terminology might be. But the main thing that I want you to understand, hey, Lorelei, thanks for joining us. The main thing that I want you to understand to be able to get the most out of this class is that I am a Course in Miracles purist, which means I take what it has taught me as the literal truth, and it is what I am attempting to live my life from that foundation. And that means that I look at everything from two perspectives. I see it from God's perspective, where we are all pure non-physical energy, absolutely eternal, powerful as can be. We created all of this. We chose to come down and have an experience of separation. And then I look at it from, okay, how is my ego playing that role? Because when you can take it and break it into two parts, which is what the course teaches us to do, and you are, 10 lessons, you're beginning to see that the course is telling you that the ego stuff is meaningless. And the way we look at things is one way of looking at things that misses everything that is of God. And it's not until later on that you're going to start seeing God's perspective. But for now, you're really understanding the ego's way of looking at things is totally, completely meaningless. It is always based on the past. It is not what you think it is. There's always a hidden agenda. So when you take everything that is happening, how does God see this? How does the ego see this? We begin to create a very clear awareness of not only where we are, because then the honesty kicks in and you can see, oh my gosh, I did this lovingly. I was in alignment with my God self. I did this from fear, from hate, from judgment. I was in alignment with my ego self. When those two are extremely clear, then you know which one you are going to value more. Because if you value clarity and peace and love, you have to align with God's way. And God's way is very, very simple. We are all one, which means everybody is you. Everybody is a reflection of you. So there cannot be anybody that you're doing something to that doesn't mean you're doing it back to you. So there is oneness, there is eternalness. Don't get focused on the physicalness. There is no such thing as death and eternity. Don't get stuck on the roles. Don't focus on that, because as an eternal being, you are one with all that is. So what you do unto another, you do to yourself. The way of the ego is separation. There's others. There's haves and have nots. They're the ones that have power, the ones without, which the ego language that I put to that. Two sides of the same coin in the ego world. There's a bully and there's a victim. So we're always operating from bully or victim in every single situation when we are aligning with the ego thought system of separation. So that means survival of me always. So I got to throw everybody else under the bus because I'm number one. With God, what I do for you, I do for me. So it is my role with that clarity is to uplift everybody, because if I do everything for the greater good of all, I'm doing it for myself too. And I don't have to be in the selfishness and greed of the ego, because I am in the awareness of the collectiveness is what is most important when I come from my individualized understanding that there's only one of us here at all times. which is why when you operate from the collective of God's perspective, you have to honor every individual's right. The ego has us do collective groups. We collect in little bitty groups, so the languaging kind of gets twisted around. But the ego is all about special groups, special people. God is everyone is special, and the individual must be honored at all times, must be seen as sovereign and equal no matter what. So from God's perspective, when we look at the world today, from God's perspective, you cannot be supporting one group, the LGBTQ versus the straight people, the Blacks Lives Matter versus the Blue Lives Matter. From God's perspective, you can't do that, because that is to break everything into segments, which does not allow for oneness to be present. When we separate ourselves into groups, then we give the ego permission to find the special group and the not so special group. This is where the attack comes in. So anyhow, with that general understanding, what I'm going to share will make more sense. And please be sure to ask as we go along.
Can I ask one question?
Absolutely.
So in that same specialness, do you also focus on relationships, husband, wife, mom, kid? That's really where I struggle, where, the kid next door is as special to me as my son, or, my neighbor's as special to me as my husband. So that's really where I'm hoping,
Yeah.
there's going to be some clarity come through. So I in the groups, and do you also touch on in personal relationships as well?
Yes, because everything is pretty much the same. When you take the course and you generalize it to everything, it's a lot easier to make sense. And I definitely struggled with that specialness for a while. There was a very challenging part of realizing that there is no such thing as anybody as special. And as a matter of fact, it was one of the areas of contention with my former husband, Ken, because I had already come to that place that I realized our oneness. And we had a conversation, I don't know, a couple of years early on into our relationship, maybe our first or second year of marriage. And I always liked inviting my kid's dad to events, because we were one family, and his then girlfriend, now wife, to participate in holidays or birthday parties or graduation celebrations, because we're all one. I knew that at a deep heart level, but I also felt that always. Just because we got divorced doesn't mean we're not family. But when I started sharing with Ken was saying to me, he was a very jealous type that began to show up later on in our relationship. And he said to me, "Why do you always invite, Philip to these functions?" And I said, "Well, he's my kid's dad, but I love him." And he said, "What do you mean you love him?" I said, "Well, I love everybody. I love is love is love. I don't have different kinds of love." And he got really upset. He says, "What do you mean you love, your former husband?" Because he wanted special love. He wanted to be the only person that I loved. But once you understand what love, the way the course would want us to understand love is kindness, love is compassion, love is gentleness, it is honesty. So if that is your definition of love, who would you want to not be honest and kind and gentle and compassionate with? So once that becomes what love is, it ceases to be what the ego uses love for, which is specialness. What can I get from you? I'll make you special so that you see me as your savior. You see me as your one and only. You put me on my pedestal, and I'll put you on your pedestal. But what happens with special love is that, because everything with the ego is about duality, it's going to have two sides. Special love, if you're not getting what you want, turns into special hate. Even with your spouse or your children, that child that does not do what you want, immediately the ego kicks in, and now mom's mad at you. I'm not happy with you. How many times I said to my kids, "I'm not happy with you," which meant I cut off gentleness, honesty, compassion, kindness. I actually cut love off under the guy said, yeah, you're my child and you're my special, love you especially more than the neighbor kid. But when you go into special hate, we literally cut off what love really is. And then it becomes the very thing that is missing in any relationship. And if we don't learn how to do that inside of our circle, family and our immediate circle, and begin to treat everybody kind, compassionate, and integrity and gentleness and honesty, we really don't know the love of God. We only know the conditional love of the ego, and does and it's what allows us to have special groups that we participate in. And so it's really a tricky thing that the mind has to be trained out of that belief system that, oh, you complete me. No, nobody completes us. We're already complete. And that falsehood that somebody completes us or somebody makes us feel special is part of the trickery that the ego uses to give us permission to basically give love when I'm getting something or withhold love when I'm getting something, which is why special relationships devolve so quickly into special hate, because we stop being honest. We stop talking about our real feelings. We stop being kind. We stop giving the cold shoulder when I don't get what I want. But we've confused that with being true love, real love. But to the
Can
ego, it's
I'm
pure
sorry.
special love. Yes, Jody.
I was just going to add, if this is helpful at all, and this is what I realized: special love, special hate. I think about it, how I used to be with Kyla. I needed her to be a certain way for me to feel okay. So I was giving my power to the external, like call them idols, or so really it was all about ego. It had really nothing to do with love at all. And it was very
Exactly.
humbling to realize that, you know.
Exactly. Great example. Me with my kids too. They had to make me look good. Otherwise, what are people going to think about me as a mom? I'm supposed to be the perfect mom, the perfect PTA, this, that, or the other. And my children needed to follow certain, they had to sit a certain way or do things a certain way or behave a certain way for me to feel comfortable with them being who they were, which meant they could not really be who they were because I wasn't being who I am, because I had been hijacked by my ego. And it absolutely, it's crazy the ways that special love operates. And it's, once you've been in this Course in Miracles, it becomes really clear, because it lays them all out there. So they're all there for us to
I have
see.
a quick question,
Yes.
Lina.
Yes, Lisa.
So in relationships that are maybe abusive, or like an absent partner, an alcoholic, a child who is very verbally abusive, how do you protect yourself or still give love under those circumstances?
All right, sister, that's a wonderful question. And it's actually something I'm going to touch on in that 6-week series that I'm going to start. I moved the date to June 28th because it's all holy relationships, and holy relationships can only be created with God love. They cannot have special love. But to answer your question,
I'm in.
but to answer your question, and this requires that you put your judgment to the side. Everybody put your judgments to the side. And I know everybody here is so open-minded, but I want to say that for whoever might be watching this later. When we are in abusive relationships, we have to look at it from God's perspective. The ego calls it abusive. How do I protect myself? There's another immediately separation. You can see it right in action. God, on the other hand, says, well, nobody can abuse you because you're whole, perfect, and complete. You're eternal. Nothing's going to happen to your true essence. So, what is this opportunity? It is a lesson. The Course in Miracles tells us everything is a lesson God would have us learn. So, what is this abuse here to teach me? 2 things. How quickly I cut off love. I stop being honest with that abusive person. I'm going to not let them know what I've got going on, because then they'll find out what I'm doing. Then they'll abuse me more. I stop being kind. I start giving the cold shoulder. I stop being compassionate, because, or I start pretending, manipulating. I better be nice. I better be quiet so that they don't yell at me. So we immediately block love. So that happens right away. The second thing is that because everything is one, and this is where I want you, whoever's watching this, to suspend judgment if you are in the midst of an abusive situation. As within, so without. If there is abuse on the outside, it's a reflection of the way you abuse yourself. And you may not be beating yourself up. You may not be drinking yourself, to oblivion. But if you are tolerating abusive behavior, that is a lack of self-love. So you abuse yourself when you remain in a situation that is not one that is conducive for the extension of love, joy, peace, fun, ease. So we have to get super honest with ourselves. Why am I in this situation? And that's going to bring up all kinds of things. Fear, fear of money. I can't be on my own. Fear that I might be alone. I'm scared of being alone. That's abusive. If you're afraid that you cannot be taken care of by this incredible creator, you don't know the creator. You don't know the power that is available to you. So we have to question every single belief that we have that keep us stuck in an abusive relationship, because what allows us to tolerate that is abusive to us. So tell me if that makes sense. You guys shake your heads. Okay.
Absolutely.
So everything is a mirror. Everything is projection in the world when there's only one of us projecting out as 8 billion of us. So Lisa, tell me if you have anything else with that, and then I'll go to Vern.
No, that was very clear. It's a little harder with the child, but it's very clear.
It is, but that child is still here as a teacher. Everything is a lesson
Yes.
God would have us learn. And in the Course in Miracles, we have three types of people that come in to teach us. One is the one-time encounters, that, somebody who's kind at us on the elevator, or somebody who cuts us off in traffic. One time, one and done. Then there are the relationships that are more sustained, work environment or friendships that, a couple of years, neighbors, your clients, you're with them, there's going to be more interaction. And then there's the lifelong relationships. And those lifelong relationships are here to teach us the most. Not necessarily everything we need to learn, but some of the most profound lessons in love come from those that we are in those longer term relationships, like husbands and former husbands and children and parents and siblings. Because if we close off to extend love because we say their behavior, because of you, I am shutting down, we miss that we can always remain open if we want to. And they're actually the best potential target for our growth, or partner for our growth. Because if we can learn to stay open, be honest, be kind, be compassionate, be gentle in the midst of somebody who is not being that, if we can do that, we have jumped into mastery. Because it's easy to like and love the easy people, but the challenging ones is our course. That's where the mastery happens. So thank you so much, Lisa, for that question. Yes, Vern.
Yeah, the term special is very charged. The word itself for many people, it means many different things. In most cases, it means something good. I have a special relationship with somebody. So the word, either I don't have any special relationships, or every relationship is special. And knowing the difference between the two tells me where I'm at. In other words, if I have special relationships, then I've immediately created separation. I'm immediately determined that part of God is not as good as other parts of God. But when I get really clear that everything is special, especially when you're trying to talk to somebody outside the course, they've heard a little bit about the course and they understand a little bit about special relationships, and they seem to have a real challenge around that, which I can understand. But when I get very clear that that word special has a charge to it, And when I get very clear for me that everything and everybody is special, that puts a whole different spin on I have a special relationship. And I
So
shouldn't have, and according to the Course, and many people perceive it this way, special relationships are not good. You shouldn't have special relationships. And a lot of people I know that come from that space. But again, that's it's charged. So for me, basically, if anybody's asking me about special relationships, I just say every relationship is special. And that's it. I just stop right there. And then your perception, okay, of the interaction between you and another individual, okay, is all based on perceptions. And it's not good or bad. It's just that that's what you're understanding what's going on. So I'll just share that.
thank you for sharing that. And that is absolutely, especially with people who are not so familiar with the Course, a wonderful way to do it. But here, as we begin to separate the two thought systems, God's thought system and the ego's thought system, we want to begin to change. So from everybody being special, we want everybody to be holy. So holiness is what we're going for, because as you said, the word special is charged, but special, as the Course wants us to understand, is a transactional relationship with another. I'll be nice so that you'll be nice back. I'll have sex with you so that you'll, want me or feel safe or whatever. I'll cook for you if you clean the dishes. I'll do whatever if you do this something for me. So that's what we have to get into with special relationships, is when we're unpacking that. And Lisa will do more of this in the Course. When you're unpacking special relationships, you are literally looking at the transactional aspect of the relationship and how quickly we stop being kind to somebody who didn't do this or that for us. They didn't ask me how I'm feeling, so fine, I'm going to give you the cold shoulder. Transaction. You have to do something for me to give you love. And that is, it's a really, really important thing to really get to the bottom of all of the ways that we have been conditioned into transactional, conditional love. And until you see it clearly, and it shows up easy with people that you don't like, well, I'm going to call them back because they were rude to me. Transaction. I won't give you the call because you didn't give me the attention. Easy to see. But when you get into the real special relationships, it's very challenging to find, because our ego doesn't want to be honest. Because the honesty that happens when you are in alignment with God is totally what gets blocked when you are in alignment with what the ego thought systems are. So with that, let's switch into this, and thank you so much, Kathy, for opening that conversation, because it's really, really important. So as we go into chapter 1, we are in section number 6, the illusion of needs. This is where we have to begin to see that needs are of the ego. And when we get clear, hello, brother, when we get clear about what our needs are from the ego perspective, then we begin to contrast that with what God wants us to know are our wants from a soul's perspective. Those two things must be separated, because if we don't understand, we're going to be operating in the lower density. So let me use just quickly the chart, and I'm going to get something printed so it's a little bit better. But when we're operating with God, we're operating at the higher levels of consciousness, which is the places that you have to be in acceptance of that other person. You got to forgive any mistakes you have made, because the goal is harmony. Anything less than that, we drop into the prideful aspect of the ego, where we go dense and it's all about me. Here it's all about me. Here it's all about harmony, which means we are beginning to collectively want to unite. So when the Course tells us, the illusion of needs, the needs of the ego are going to be selfish. Our wants in alignment with our higher consciousness is all because we are creating harmony. All right, so let's start the reading here. So you who want peace can find it only by complete forgiveness. Whereas forgiveness is above the line. We have got to understand the thought system of the ego, the thought system of God, and then we're all going to go through the dark nights of, the dark years of the ego, where we are going through a process of questioning all of our thoughts and beliefs. So this is why we're going to spend a lot of time going up into the higher dimensions, and we can be the presence of unconditional love, and then we drop down to the lower dimensions of conditional love. Why? Because the ego is always attempting to take care of its needs. It really doesn't care about anybody else. It is extremely selfish, and I'm only doing for you if there's something in it for me. So we have to learn to begin to forgive ourselves for having forgotten the truth of who we are when we chose to have an incarnation to descend into the lower densities of forgetfulness. We need to forgive ourselves for having forgotten. And by the way, Kathy, the way that I explain the forgiveness of the Course in the simplest of ways is just what I said. The Course wants us to forgive ourselves for forgetting who we are. So something happens, we lie, we cheat, we whatever, forgive ourselves for forgetting that we could have done it differently. We could have done it lovingly. Same thing with another. We forgive them for they knew not what they're doing because they forgot who they really are. So that combination helped me tremendously to really understand the radical forgiveness that the Course is talking about, because it really is totally unlike what the world teaches. But it is. We're always forgiving because we forgot that there was another way of being. Sentence number 2 says, no learning is required by anyone unless he wants to learn it and believes in some way that he needs it. All right. So with what's happening with the world today, and somebody's resisting listening to somebody else's opinion, is because they don't believe that they need that information. They don't believe they need to learn what that other person knows. Why? Because the ego in its prideful self, because that's what pride is all about, it demands that everybody believe what I believe. And it is the ego in all of its needs. One of the things that it doesn't want us to understand is how important it is for us to open our mind. Because when we open our mind, we are closer to harmony. When we close our mind and we're in pridefulness, we don't want to learn what the other one knows so that I can stay in my righteousness. So this is the illusion of needs, is the ego thinks it doesn't have any needs, but operates always in protecting its own selfish needs. And as we keep going, this unpacks a lot more. So sentence number 3, while lack does not exist in the creation of God, it is very apparent in what you have made. When you operate in oneness with God, nothing is missing. So when you stay in an abusive relationship because you don't have the money or you don't have a place to stay, you don't understand that everything is supplied. Like the lilies of the valleys have everything that they need. The mind of the ego has been conditioned to believe in lack. It is one of the primary belief systems of the ego, is that there is not enough. I got to get mine before you get it. The 1% have it, the 99 don't. It's a win-lose transaction. It is always about there's just not enough to go around. And in that mentality, we've been really comfortable with hoarding, with accumulating, with getting, with protecting. So the Course wants us to get really clear. If you're going to shift your perspective to God's perspective, you've got to recognize that there cannot be lack when your mind is the one that creates it. Your mind is the one that creates everything. So either you are creating in abundance because you believe it. You have to have that 100% faith. You trust the power in you to manifest whatever is happening. If you're here, you manifested being here. You manifested your family, you manifested where you are. Everything is by choice. Nothing is thrown upon us that is not by a choice at a
I could hear you. And she is frozen.
Okay, she's back.
Now she's
Okay.
gone.
Unmute yourself, Laina. You're muted.
Okay, you guys. Yeah,
Now
everything
you're okay.
disappeared.
Now you're
Yay!
okay.
Everything disappeared for a
Okay,
second.
you're back.
All right.
Okay.
So At the level, thank you so much. At the level of that we need to get to be able to really create some massive shifts on the planet right now, we have got to really sit with the fact that we have created everything that is in front of us. We have created our family. We picked these people. We've created our circumstances. We have chosen. Just like a writer writes a script about, oh, okay, this person is this income, is this color, is this ethnicity, this gender, this whatever. We did the same thing at a soul level. The script is written. The course is really clear. The script is written. To the ego, that is very offensive unless everything is going my way. But when things are not going my way, then somebody created the script. I'm not in charge. I would not have scripted these crazy parents of mine. Well, that is a conflict that the ego has us in so that we can accept some power, but not all power. Because to fully awaken, you have to accept all power completely. And the ego wants us to think we're awake, but doesn't let us see our power, which is why so many woke people walk around talking about, I create my own reality, but they're operating in fear of the virus or the jab or the this or the that or the government, or fear that they're not going to have Social Security. So a mind that entertains fear is a mind that entertains lack, and that blocks the clarity of realizing that as a creator of all that is, we need to accept all that is happening as something we call to ourselves because we scripted it. And this is why all lessons, everything is a lesson God would have us learn, because we have scripted the perfect circumstances and people to take us to whatever level on the journey we're supposed to be at. And it is our work to be honest. This is why honesty is one of the hallmarks of love, because in honesty, you can say, you know what? I'm in pride. I'm in my egoic pride. That's self-love. Love myself enough to not let my egoic mind hijack me into believing that I'm righteous, which blocks me from love. As well as it's very loving to say in honesty, I want harmony. I don't need to be right. That's why the Course says you can be right or happy. And yes, many of us say, well, I want to be both happy and right. Well, the righteousness of the ego, no, we don't want that, because for the ego to be right, somebody has to be wrong. That creates separation. We're not in the oneness. So everything has to be sorted out. Are we in one? Are we in egoic separation? If we're in separation, there's going to be lack because there's somebody to compete with for what there is. So let me read this again, sentence number 3. While lack does not exist in the creation of God, it is apparent in what you have made, because we've used our power to make lack. Every time, and see, this is one of the things that is really uncomfortable. And by the way, let me just stop here for a second. Part of what humanity is about to face, because there is an acceleration of the energies, and there is going to be an acceleration of information coming to the surface about the darkness, that the corruption that has contributed to darkness. I want you to pay attention to what I'm going to say. This is so, so important. While lack does not exist in the creation of God, God did not give any of us reason to have experienced lack. We were placed on, we have made this planet. God created this beautiful world that we have made a mess out of. God created a planet full of food, full of water, full of clean air, full of plants and berries and all kinds of food everybody could eat if we just all shared what is on the planet. Humans, what have humans made? It is very apparent in what you have made. Lack is apparent in what we made. What did we make? We made divisions. We started chopping up space. This is my land, that is your land. I've got the fruit, you have the, you've got the pigs, so we might trade. But eventually, over time, the prideful, egoic, greedy side of the human, as it moved into positions of power, which means it went lower and lower and lower into density. Those who have the most power and the most money and use it against others are not seeking harmony. They are looking into the total separation of themselves from others in specialness. Talk about big specialness. This is why evil is part of what happens when you go to those places. So what we are going to have to reconcile with, I just put out a post that said, get your spiritual head out of your ass, because too many spiritual people walking around in love and light are not wanting, well, it's because the ego doesn't let them, are in denial that every single time that we vote for anybody, put anybody in office, I'm talking about local or national, that is willing to allow starvation, we are creating lack for another, that is willing to take us to war, that is willing to bomb somebody else. It is creating lack for another. When there are things that are done that suppress one group over another, we are participating in the making of lack. So we've got to get really clear that our support does contribute to the lack of others. And looking at that is part of what is necessary for humanity to wake up, because as long as there's lack in the universe, as long as somebody is not receiving of the bounty of the creation that has been given to us, we are holding the vibrational frequency of lack as our reality. And because everything is done unto ourselves, we experience lack in our lives in some way, shape, or form. You may not lack money, but you might lack joy. You may not lack joy, but you might lack money. You may not lack money or joy, but you might lack in health. It is a consciousness that is an active energy that stays on the planet. And until we see all of us as one and make certain that everybody is experiencing what our Constitution states, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, equally for all, we are not operating at the level of harmony, which means to get there, we got a lot of forgiveness to do. And it begins with forgiving ourselves. I've had to do this. I've voted for a lot of people who created a lot of destructive things. I mean, I voted for lots of presidents who took us to war. And I've had to sit with forgiving myself for contributing to the lack and the suffering on this planet, because if I don't own it, then I don't know oneness. If it happens over there, then I'm separate from it. And then my mind can compartmentalize, and the ego compartmentalizes things so that we don't feel, which is why so many people are feeling a lot of angst right now, because what has been dark, what has been done methodically, is coming to the surface because we have to say no to it collectively. Yes, Vern.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a scenario that I'd like you to address based on what you've just shared with us about the idea when you vote, your vote basically can cause chaos for others. So here's a practical current time issue we're facing. And here's a scenario. If we have borders in our country, and we don't enforce the borders, in other words, if we vote for somebody who says, okay, I'm going to make sure we maintain sovereignty, okay, borders, and I vote for that person, am I then contributing to the people that I'm keeping out? Am I then causing them harm or chaos because I voted for the concept of having healthy borders? Based on what you just said, and I'm just trying to understand it. I'm not pro or con either way.
Great question.
I want, because this is real stuff right now. I mean, a vote could come up right now today. They could announce we're going to have a special election. It's all about voting to having borders or no borders.
Yeah.
So if we vote for somebody who says we should have healthy borders, then I'd like your response. If we vote for no borders at all, that seems to be more aligned in a sense with the concept you're saying. Now, it could be my perception, so I'm having ownership with this. So, I mean, this is real. This is one of those
Totally.
spiritual application of a current
it is
situation that's very real. It's happening right now. So help me understand, if that vote came up right now and I had to make a choice, if I voted to have healthy borders, now that means basically people can still get in, but they have to go through a process to get in. Understand what I'm saying? I'm not talking about closed borders.
No,
I'm
I get
talking
it.
about having a healthy way of doing this.
I get it.
And we're at that right now. I mean,
I get
every
it.
day in the news, you get hammered with it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll stop. Give me
Yeah. Let me
help me
address-
understand this.
Yes. So here's the thing. I want you to think of healthy borders in countries, no different than healthy borders in relationships with creating boundaries. It's the same. It's all the same
Healthy
thing.
boundaries.
All the same thing. So here's how it's so important. We're going to break it down into two parts. God did not create borders. God created one people, free to roam. If we were operating at this level of consciousness, and Kathy, the reason I have the little colored people is because they signify different levels of consciousness. So when each of us is born, we are in the light. So that's what my little yellow people are. As we begin to descend, as children are raised, we're conditioned and we begin to cultivate an ego. We become denser. We get a little darker. We move from being the light to blocking the light. And then we get to the place as adults that we're so dense, we've forgotten our own light. God is out there and all the light is out there and something I need to achieve. And if we go really, really dense, these are the places of money and power that are unchecked and corruption, we can get pretty dark. And as you can see, I only have one little red person because the 1% and the 99% is pretty obvious. There are more people who live at some level of love and light versus being so disconnected and totally, completely egoic that it turns into pure evil. And this map of consciousness is a combination that I created with information, the map of consciousness from Dr. David Hawkins in Power versus Force, and the scale of emotions that is a list that is compiled by Abraham. So I've taken the two and I've created my own. So when we are operating at the level of perfection, newborn child, we are operating in joy and peace and oneness and bliss. And little by little, we begin to descend into the density of egoic thinking. So to answer that question about borders and boundaries, same thing. As you do with everything, you've got to you got to look at it from two perspectives. From God's perspective, you don't need them. Number one, you created that we're part of the creation. We don't need boundaries from anything, and we are sovereign beings. We're powerful beings. Jesus exampled that for us. Martin Luther King Jr. exampled that for us. They were not afraid. They were expressing love no matter what, because they believed that we are all created equal. So from that side, we clearly do not operate in alignment with God based on all of what's going on in our borders. So then we got to go to the border, to the way the ego perceives the border. Then you've got to look at it through this prism. Where are we on the border? Well, at a level of pride in your country, when we are dealing with almost 8 billion people who are, for the most part, unconscious, we are having to then deal with their different levels of consciousness. Somebody who is in the evil realm, who is a murderer, who's a rapist, who is really their consciousness is in total, complete selfishness and greed. Well, while we are operating in separation, it's our responsibility. This is where the action comes in. Action aligned with consciousness says, we need to make sure that the people who are operating at a higher consciousness and they get along and they police themselves, they have an internal guidance system, they're self-regulated. Let's make sure that we don't send these people who can create harm to this place where people are used to operating in harmony and closer to harmony. So there is a duty based on your consciousness to understand where people's consciousness are at. So to take the example of the border that we have down, we'll just focus on Mexico. There are people of different consciousnesses that are attempting to get in. Those with a higher consciousness know, well, I want to come into this country and I want to work and I want to do this and do that. There is a path for that. That is a legal way that we have set up inside of a consciousness of a people that operate by certain rules, that have agreements to operate and abide by certain things that have been put in place for the greater good of all. So those people don't mind coming in that way. Then there are those who are not looking to enter that way. They're looking to enter in other ways for many reasons. So let's look at, I'm going to focus on 3 reasons only, because this can be broken down into so many different ways. But this is a great question because it does address understanding the levels of consciousness and understanding that this is a very complex thing, that we cannot solve it with, for one, with the same mindset created it, but number 2, we've been attempting. The reason it's all fucked up is we are solving things with egoic thinking. In different levels of consciousness, we're attempting to run things. But let's talk about 3 types of people who are not coming in legally. 1, people who are scared, oppressed, are in horrible situations that are trying to get out of where they are. Then we got to look at that. Why is that happening? Why are those people in terrible situations and they want to risk their lives to get to a better situation? They want to come up to a higher consciousness. Well, here we open up Pandora's box. What has this country contributed to doing to create some of the discomforts and the unrests and what has happened in other countries that causes them to want to run for their lives? There's a lot of dishonesty. And then we get into specialness. There's a lot of dishonesty and things that have been done because our governments, when people get into positions of power, they're all individual people. They're operating in high consciousness or low consciousness. When they enter into positions of power and money is involved, a lot of deals get done that harm the innocent. When money and power are involved, a lot of things have been done. I mean, you can look at the Banana Republic stuff. You can go down to South America and see how people in positions of power have devastated those countries, have pillaged, have literally just sucked the juice out of some of those countries. Purely greed only, lowest levels of consciousness in the highest positions in the land. So you've got somebody running from oppression. Why? How are our brothers and sisters hurting? We have to address that. So that needs to be looked at in one way. Then you've got the second one that I'm going to use. And again, I'm only going to use 3 examples. The second example, people who genuinely want to get away from something bad and they want to come here and contribute. Then there's the other group of people who are coming in because they are charging people to get them across. They're not interested in bringing them the legal way. They are charging them. And when there's money involved, well, you don't want to cross the borders if somebody's getting a cut out of that money that is being paid for somebody to cross through the border. Back to, we've got people in positions of power who benefit from financially what is happening, the distress that others are going through. We've got to look at that. We've got to see, well, how is this possible that people are willing to pay this kind of money when they could pay their money to come in, less money to come in the legal way? What is this mentality that is creating this system? The third example is those that are at the absolute lowest levels of consciousness that know they're not going to get in the legal way because they got a rap sheet. So they've got to be able to get in here in a way that is undercover because they're at that consciousness. If you have that level of consciousness in South America, wherever you go, there you are, you're going to bring that level of consciousness here. So for a country that is so divided, we're divided because we look at that as an emotional thing. If we look at it as, well, we don't want all those people coming here using up our benefits and we have to pay for their insurance. So again, this is very complex, but the ego is in lack. Like there's not enough for all of us. There is enough for all of us. So that mentality that there's not enough, we've got to look at that. Where are we operating in lack when we are creators of abundance. So we've got to look at that. Then there are those, well, we got to let everybody in because, we have to allow everybody to come in. Why are we so fixed in bringing people to this country when we are such a powerful country that we should be assisting, using our resources instead of going there to rob them blind? Use our resources to educate, to help them learn how to fish, to help teach them how to provide for themselves, help create wonderful economies, wonderful politics. The reason that is not happening in the world is because we have low consciousness that is at the highest levels possible. So in a relationship, when you're talking about borders and boundaries, same thing. Why do we need to keep somebody out? Do we need to distance ourselves from somebody? Like, some couple of my friends who unfriended me because they said I was posting too much information that had to do with politics, and it wasn't spiritual, it wasn't whatever, it was too dark for them. So what consciousness judges what's too dark? Why do we have to create a boundary with a friend? Can we not listen? Can we not be open to what somebody else has to say and still love them? Well, anybody that and this is something that I learned and I can't remember where it was, but the quote basically says, every friendship or every person that we discard, we have first deceived them. And the reason we deceive them is because we're not being our loving self. I'm going to get rid of you because you said something negative. Really, the truth is, I can't handle the negativity because I'm not willing to look at the mirror that it presents to me. So in a personal relationship, we need to set up boundaries because we are at different levels of our journey. Jesus didn't need boundaries from the people who were going to come kill him because he knew he's eternal. He wasn't afraid of death. Somebody else might need to put up a fence. Somebody else may need to, security system. Somebody else, may be able to just say, I'm going to block you from my phone. There are lots of different levels of boundaries that we can use with individuals, but it all comes to the same thing. Are we willing to look at our consciousness and how our consciousness contributed to that situation, whether it's borders in countries or personal boundaries? The reason we need them is because our lower consciousness have created separation, have created divisions, have created devastation. We, through special relationships, go from special love to special hate. Then we need to set up a boundary. So it's a complex answer. It's pretty simple to me. You're aligned with God or you're aligned with ego. When you're aligned with ego, you got to look at all of the different ways that this has been created. And right now, the mess at the border is, when I look at that, the higher consciousness of let them in, because, we're an abundant world. Those are not the people that are helping to bring those people in and assist them, because it's a bountiful world. The lower consciousness that are letting them in are primarily focused on exploitation of what is happening. And that has to be looked at, that has to be addressed. But that requires honesty and transparency and kindness, compassion. Because if we were to ask people, well, why are you exploiting these why are you charging? Why are you a coyote charging people to cross? There has to be a level of honesty, and we can't have those conversations in this environment. But energetically, where we're shifting to, by the end of this decade, those conversations are going to be very easy, because the energy that is coming into the planet is calling us into transparency. And those who cannot be honest and transparent are not going to be able to sustain positions of power for very long. That's about to crumble. So, Bern, I know that was a long answer.
I appreciate it, and still, because I'm not trying to drag this out, but I think this is one of those things that where the pedal meets the metal. I mean, this is the practical application of what we've been talking about for weeks.
Exactly.
In a sense.
Exactly.
And where I'm at on it is that all those things that you said that need to be addressed, I believe need to be addressed, including the way that we have supposedly given foreign aid to some of these countries, and what's happened to the foreign aid we've given to those countries. Where did the money actually go? Where did the resources go? In other words, even if we are trying to do things, it seems to me that that's being blocked by their loco where they live, where their environment that they're in is being blocked. But again, here we go back again. This is that practical application of current action. If there was a vote announced today, do we keep the borders open? Do we open them up wide open, or do we shut them down?
Well, back to what we've been
that choice has to be made, and therefore, if we now we could step back and say, well, I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to participate in this. I'm going to take the higher ground and not contribute to this farce of so-called voting or election about what to do or not do. But that's not where we're at, because I believe that many of the things that are happening, in order to resolve many of the issues, it's going to require people to stand up and say, I want to have sovereignty, and I am willing to voice where I'm at, what my opinion is, and not through violence, but in a sense through a voting process of some type. That I still have to take the action. I still have to take the step. So I guess where I'm at is I go back to that, original, and I'm just asking you, because you're as clear as anybody I know of about how you understand this for yourself. If a ballot was put in front of you today and there were two boxes on it, one box says that we will open the borders wide open, or we will shut the borders totally down. And that's the only two choices you have. You don't have all those spaces in between the scenarios that you presented, which I think are important and powerful. Which one would you pick?
I would pick, well, before I answer that.
Yeah, okay.
Every decision, as we have been saying now, this is what our 18th week coming together. Every decision, we have to be honest. Are we doing it with our ego, or are we doing it with God? Are we coming to a place of harmony, or are we coming into a place of division? And for me, in harmony, the vote that I would choose is to close the border. And the reason I would do that,
I don't want to interrupt, that is so powerful. What you just said, that you got to that conclusion based on what you have to do now in the moment, in the present moment. That is so powerful that you were able to get to that point. Because I think a lot of people, to be really frank, that have listened to many of the scenarios and the teachings and that, would actually think, well, of course she's going to say, open up the borders, because if we don't, then we're in denial. The ego's taken over, or we're in lack. We don't have enough, so we're going to keep these people out.
Yeah.
You understand what that's why I think this is so, I mean, these last 15, 20 minutes we've been in right now is the fruit of all of the time and energy that you've put into this for 18 weeks or whatever it's been. And so I'm not trying to dominate here. It's just that it is so important, because people need to hear what you're saying about the spiritual concept and how to apply and rise yourself up, to ascend yourself to a level of playing at the highest possible level you can, and address the practical scenario, physical situations that people are involved in, because it's not just about the border. That ballot could have many different boxes on it from many things that are happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Defund the police, or not. Mm-hmm. Which one would you choose? Mm-hmm. This is real stuff.
This is the practical application of what the Course in Miracles wants us to understand in this illusion of needs. And just to go ahead, Christo.
Yeah, Christo.
I think I've really enjoyed this wonderful discussion, and I think it's so appropriate, because at every level, with the ones in the 5D realm or in the denser realm of 3D, I think borders come to play in so many ways. And what as I'm thinking now, what would I say if I'm a 3D person or I'm a 5D person? What would I say in certain circumstances?
Oh, I lost you. Krista?
Can you hear me?
No,
Hello?
now I
Am
can.
back?
Yeah.
Yeah. What comes to me is the wisdom that grows for within one at every level. And my sense is that I know from my own experience, heavily in the 3D, I haven't had very great wisdom. And the more I move into the closer to the 5D realm, I have wisdom to understand what is appropriate. What it also taught me a lot is that the intelligence that designed the human body has automatically injected by demonstration borders inside the body, because you don't have the cells mixing with one another in terms of their function, where you don't have chemicals are allowed to go in various places, because otherwise the body will crumble without the integrity and order of its required boundaries of functioning. So I think at every level there's a functioning. We grow up with that as parents in a home where you have children or babies, start with a baby and then a child and then an older child, their boundaries, and the 5D parent still would have to have boundaries as to the electrical outputs and the electricity and and chemicals that you have in the house. So at every level, I believe, of consciousness, is boundaries of function. It's just pure common sense, which works into a wisdom of operations. That's all I have to say. And I really enjoy this conversation. Thank you.
No, thank you for that comment. When we are aligned with God, we are tapping into an intelligence that takes us out of the selfish realm of, I've got to put up a border because it's convenient for me. When we move into the realm of as we are moving towards that 5D, which is living in this higher consciousness, we have to move through the 4D. The 4D is that bridge where we have to question all of our beliefs, where we have to take 100% responsibility for every thought that we have and how it creates, because every single thought creates. There is an order to everything. And when you move to the higher levels of consciousness, you literally are allowing intelligence to flood you. The more that we go into the egoic realm, the lower realms, the 3D realms of separation and selfishness, we literally are blocking intelligence. We're operating with very little intelligence, no matter how many certificates we might have that says that because we become intelligent or experts in one tiny little area when there is so much else. And that's where we are very dysfunctional, because we don't have politicians talking to the police, talking to the parents, talking to the people, literally a round table where all are bringing forth their expertise to discuss what is happening with integrity and transparency. That's not happening, which is why we have the problems that we have in a personal relationship, in a family, dysfunctional family, or in a dysfunctional political situation at the border. It's the same thing. Different levels of consciousness are operating. And the reason I would close the borders is because if I were president, or even if there was a vote today, I would close it and call everybody into beginning to look at their parts in it. Because if we don't stop the madness, we continue it. I mean, so to me, that's very simple. And to stop and to close the borders when there are already legal paths of entry. One of the things that I love doing is I like, and I do this because it's part of my own healing. I like to search for the information that is rarely, it doesn't show up on the mainstream news, of the suffering of the people. And when I watch the videos of the children dying in that river, crossing those rivers, when I watch the videos of the people who are brought into this country illegally, because if they come in illegally, there's no trace of who they are. And now these children can be sold into sexual slavery. When I watch the cost to those who are innocent and are just basically being used, to me, it is not worth being a country that allows for that to happen. One life that gets hurt is too many. I remember hearing something, and I'm going to butcher this, but please don't try to correct me, because it really, unless you know exactly the details, But the story was along these lines, and this happened when Trump was president, and there was a potential attack, possible attack that could have been done on a country. I don't remember if it was Iran or Iraq. It was, I believe, one of those two, maybe Libya. And there had been, and I read this from the perspective of a general that was part of this, and they had presented to Trump that it was okay to go ahead and why we needed to go ahead and bomb this particular area because there were some bad people there. And Trump had given the go ahead. And as they were getting, because apparently there was a couple of go ahead moments, once their initial go ahead, and then as it got closer, there was, okay, you can go ahead and do it. One was, okay, you can do it. Let's prepare. Are we prepared? Are we ready? What's it going to take? And then the final go ahead. Well, everything was set up, ready to go. And it had been determined that it was going to be like a $30 million or $30 billion cost for, or $3 billion. I don't remember the numbers, to go ahead and do this attack. And somebody said, I don't remember who, said that target that we were looking to attack is actually, there is an innocent person there. Let's not do that. And somebody said, but there are bad people around there. So that's okay. There's one innocent person, who cares? We're going to get rid of 30 bad people. And Trump said, and when I read this, or watched it on video, I can't remember. It was so profound to me. It shook me to my core. One of the reasons why I support him. He said, well, no, we're not going to attack. And the people around him said, but we're ready with $3 billion. We're ready to go. And he said, we can't risk that one innocent person's life for this. And the people that were trying to get him to go ahead with it said, but sir, it's $3 billion that are already set in motion, because, you get all these people ready to go and you prepare the army. So a lot has been already spent. The ammunition is purchased. All that stuff is already spent. It's ready. It's just a matter of dropping it on these people. And we've got $3 billion invested in this. That's what a waste. And Trump basically said to those people, well, to that one person whose life is going to be saved, $3 billion is not a waste. Because that $3 billion included doing all the research that allowed them to know that there was going to be innocent casualty, and he was not going to risk one innocent person to kill the other however many bad people that were there. So we've got to get really clear that at some point, humanity will be looking at things from, is this loving or is this selfish? Is this of God or is this of ego? We're not there in the big picture, but we have to start. We've got to be the change we want to see in the world. And if we can start setting up boundaries within our own families and integrity, I really cannot handle being with you right now because what you say bothers me, and it bothers me because I'm not confident enough in my own self. I let your words still affect me. So I'm going to have to set up a boundary because I'm the one who's weak. So I need the boundary to protect me instead of to keep you out because you hurt me. I'm going to set up the boundary so I can find my strength and I can find my voice. And when I have my voice, then I can speak up for me. And from that place, if this relationship doesn't work anymore, fine, we will go separate ways. But we have to be honest that every single time we set up a boundary is because there's a sense of weakness that is within us. If we knew our strength, we don't need boundaries. And the borders right now are because this country, the reason I would vote for the border is because this country is weak. We have weak leadership right now. And the boundary needs to be set up because there is weakness on both sides. And until we get honest about what needs to be done to strengthen both sides, we should not open up the borders and allow mayhem when we already know that it is happening. So there's a lot of internal work that needs to happen. And we are kind of at the top of that. We got 10 more minutes. I do want to finish this paragraph simply because I want to tie this together, and you'll see how it even unpacks more. Maybe not the full paragraph, but part of it. because it all ties together. All of this ties together. Consciousness is consciousness. We're one or we're separate. We create borders with consciousness, or we create borders with our ego. And becoming totally and completely aligned with God requires that we see that all the dysfunctions in the world, we have contributed to them. And we got to clean that up by getting more active. This is part of that action that is necessary. So in sentence number 4, well, let me read 3 again, because 4 ties to 3. While lack does not exist in the creation of God, it is very apparent in what you have made with our ego. It is, in fact, the essential difference between the two. Lack is made by humans, and abundance is God's creation. So we've got to look at our participation here. And the Course in Miracles says everything that happens with God is a creation. Everything that happens with our ego is made. And it is made because it's temporary. It's not eternal. So at some point it's going to break down, which is why our systems that are man-made are breaking down. And the only thing that is going to be lasting is going to be our constitutional founding father documents, what is the essence of what is the foundation of the freedom that Americans have enjoyed, is because it was God inspired. Anything that says that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with the same inalienable rights of life, liberty, and happiness, is what is going to stand. We're going to move towards the 5th dimension of consciousness, a new earth, with that as our founding document, as we had it 250 years ago. But for 250 years, our egoic minds, our greed, our selfishness, our corruption has not allowed us to experience that as the law of the land that we all abide by, because there are too many who are selfish and greedy and only want life, liberty, and for them and not everybody else. So man has made a lot of messes that need to be cleaned up. So lack implies that you would be better off in a state somehow different than the one that you are in. Lack is a statement that we say, I prefer to struggle than to allow myself to open up to the potential abundance that is possible if I align with God. So the ego is what puts us in suffering, because it's what separates us through that belief from opening up to so much more. But to move into the higher realms of consciousness, abundance is not just money and stuff. Abundance is a consciousness that knows that nothing is missing. It is an expectation, like the lilies of the valley, that I'll have what I need when I need it. To the ego, abundance is accumulation. How much more can I get? And to a conscious creator, to one that is in alignment in the higher realms, and this is my work. I'm definitely not there. But it is where the mind that knows what it wants can manifest it instantaneously, because you understand how to work consciousness. And there are children that have been born, and that is where they operate at that level of high consciousness. In our group chat, I'm going to put a video called Superhuman, which these children, they're using their mind to move things, to create things, it's absolutely powerful. But we got trained out of that. So it is, we have to look at, and in honesty again, we only experience lack because at some level, it's what we wanted to experience. So we have to get honest. If I don't have what I want, it's because I'm blocking it, and look for all of the blocks that we have built against that. So until the separation, with quotes, until the separation, which is the meaning of the fall, nothing was lacking. You know what the fall is? We fell down into the lower densities of consciousness. Our mindset, our beliefs are dense, separate, lack, limitation, work hard. Some have it, some don't have it. At the higher levels of consciousness, you don't need boundaries, because everything knows where to be at the right and perfect place. You don't need to create a boundary that says, well, those of you, the Eskimos, you have to stay in Alaska. You can't come to Florida. We don't have to put a boundary between the Eskimos and the Floridians, because the Eskimos like that. There's an intelligence that says that's where they stay. The Floridians love the sunshine. You don't have to set up a boundary and say, well, you can't go to Alaska. They're not going to go there. unless they go on a cruise and they just, it's a quick enjoy the experience and leave. So there are boundaries that we, as you were saying, Crystal, there is an intelligence that calls us to be in the appropriate place at the appropriate time. When left to our internal guidance system, everybody is where they need to be, and they don't encroach on somebody else's space, because there is no sense of lack. There's no need to go encroach on somebody else's stuff or space, because it is a healthy knowingness within. So until that separation, which is the meaning of the fall, nothing was lacking. The Garden of Eden, nothing was lacking until we ate of the fruit of good and evil. Good and evil, love and fear, God and ego. That's all that is. When the mind begins to get conditioned to believe things that are not natural, we create the sense of separation, and then we fall down in consciousness. So there were no needs at all before the fall. Needs arise only when you deprive yourself. Let me end with just that sentence there. The only reason we have needs is because we have deprived ourselves, because we have been conditioned into lack. The average person on this planet has been put through a system of schooling that blocks us from our creativity, that it cuts us off from accessing God, and it puts us into a box of performing tasks for those who are in charge, for those who are the bosses, the 1%, whatever that might be. Our minds have been systematically dumbed down and taken away from our ability to tap into the creative source of all that is. And guess what? The creative source of all that is in every single person who is breathing, because if you're breathing, you have the breath of life, you have God in you. And this work is about unraveling all of the layers of beliefs that caused us to fall off of our awareness and alignment with source, and it caused us to little by little densify ourselves. And right now, humanity is being moved into two different dimensions. And I know everybody here you understand what's happening. Spiritually speaking, we are going to have a bifurcation. We are going to be moving. We're going to experience it on this planet as separation by states, by countries. Those who operate at a higher consciousness, people are going to move there. Those who operate at a lower consciousness, people are going to move there. Those who want to be oppressed are going to move to California, which is why they've got millions of people leaving California, because they want to move to places where they're not going to be where they're going to have more freedom. So we're going to see it in our country. We're going to see it on the planet, because there is a movement. Those who are aligned in sovereignty and don't want to be controlled are people who want to live in a state of freedom, because they know how to regulate themselves, and their personal boundaries come with respect to others, and they won't need borders. But those who continue to move into the lower realms of consciousness of control are going to need borders, because that lower frequency of control draws to it those who, one, don't mind being controlled, and those who like to control. Like attracts like. Higher consciousness, cooperation, collaboration, that is going to be happening. Be prepared to see more and more of that bifurcation right here on this planet. As more things arise, the more that people are going to have to say, how did I contribute to this mess? Because the Course doesn't want us to feel guilty about what we did. The Course wants us to understand that we were powerful and we made it. We contributed to it. And in the responsibility of saying, yes, I contributed to that dysfunction, then we go, well, if I use my power to create what I don't want, let me then use my power to create what I do prefer. And with a consciousness of harmony, what we will do will be for the greater good of all. So here we are at about the time that we complete the call. So unmute yourselves, and I want to hear from you. If you got any nuggets, and if you did, how are you going to apply them, or what was helpful? I want to start with you, Kathy, being here for the first time.
Wow. I'll start with wow. It's definitely, I have made a commitment to myself to challenge my belief system. my conditional belief system. And that's not easy. So that's why I'm here. That's why I've started this Course in Miracles. Things are showing up in my life where I'm like, I don't know if I can get with that, because it's so deep in me to see that as wrong, or to see that as against God. So that's what I'm here for. I'm very fresh on this journey. I certainly understand the concepts. I've been not only teaching them, but having them come through me. But now there's like a need for a deeper commitment and willingness to shift. So, you know, I some of the things you were saying, I was like, hell no. Some of the things you're saying, I'm like, oh yeah, I get that. I mean, that's just the truth. That's just what's coming through me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
my intention of joining this is to be open and willing to challenge my belief system, to see what's best and highest for me, what's coming through as my God self that maybe I wasn't willing to look at in the past. So I'm in. The only practical question I would have is, do I need to go buy the book? Because I have been using the website, and it's not, you know, even looking at the book on the website, it's not the same as what you're sharing. So I'm grateful for the challenging perspectives, and grateful for the ones that I felt aligned with, and willing to look at all of them.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Wow. And that is what is happening to those who are stuck, what I'm going to call in the middle, that have enough awareness that everything is love and light, and want really, truly wonderful things for others, because your desire probably to open the borders because you want to be helpful. But what happens is that if we don't see the other side of what is happening, we get trapped into believing that we're being helpful when we're actually participating unknowingly in some things that are not loving. I mean, we want to open the border, but people are dying in the river. People are being put into human trap. How is that loving? So our mind has to go through some mental gymnastics to look at, yes, we would want to open things up, but let's do it in a way that makes sense. Just as in our home, yeah, we want to open up the doors and never lock them. But if we live in an area that not everybody's of that consciousness, we've got to look at that consciousness. So if we're not willing to leave our doors and put a sign, my door is open for anybody who wants to come in, then we also have to do that at the bigger level. But it's all the same. It's all about consciousness. And most spiritual people, and I know because I saw myself right here, are in this middle way where we have gotten enough awareness that we know we are one, but we haven't awakened to the realization of what creates a separation that allows for the suffering of others. Because our ego gets spiritualized, and we operate in a I just want to be around love and light people, and turns a blind eye to all of the suffering that's on the planet. But that energy is part of our energy because of the oneness. And this is what the Course in Miracles helped me really understand, that it's very clear, until all beings have awakened, none of us is awake, because we have darkness inside of us, because we have made it, we have projected it. It's in all of us. You can't take the darkness out of the energy, because you can't divide the energy. We can block it with our mind and decide, no, that's not mine, that's over there, that's not my issue. But until I began to see what's really happening, that my participation in pretty much in decisions, and the biggest ones are through voting, until I saw the dark side of things, I wasn't really looking at it in a balanced way. And that is exactly what you said you're doing, is being open-minded. And I'm telling you, Kathy, your awakening will accelerate the more you choose to tell your mind, nope, I'm not going to block that. I'm going to hear what that is, and I'm going to stay open to see how is that, and go deep into, where would this person come up with that? Let me research, how did they come up with that, and go to the place that we really have walked in another man's shoes. We won't really fully understand all of the different levels of consciousness that are on this planet. And we have to accept them, because if they're out there, they're in here as well. So thank you so much for that. And Lisa's right there with you, Kathy. Very cool. Who else? Dondra, did you get any nuggets today? Or Lorelei or John, Patricia, anybody? Just unmute yourselves, please.
This is Dondra. Thank you so much. It just helps put clarity into everything every time I listen to you. And I enjoyed the podcast yesterday. But I would
Get your
advise
spiritual
everybody to
head
go-
out of your ass.
Yes, it was very appropriate. Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, that was one of the things that I had to look at myself. When my ego got all spiritualized, I had to come off of my spiritual pedestal where I thought I was more enlightened than I was, or more awake than I was, and begin the process of humbling. Humbling ourselves happens when we get humiliated a couple of times and we're willing to be open-minded to go, oh my gosh, maybe I don't know it all. So yeah, thank you for that. Anybody else?
Lots to process. It's just like shovels full of things to try to, you know, I'm not as familiar with not very familiar at all with the Course in Miracles, and it's all it's strange how it's somehow things sound familiar, like where have I heard that? Although I know I'm not familiar with that, with the book and the course. It's like some of it is like from another land, from another time, from another book. I don't know, but some of it sounds very familiar, and there's so much to process in what you say that it's like, wow, am I an alien, or how is it I don't know all this, or that I've managed to ignore so much of it for such a large portion of my life. So I find it very very rewarding to be on these calls, and very humbling, and giving me lots to think about.
Thank you, John. And to answer your question, are you an alien? Yes, you are. We all are. We did not come from here. We came to here. And yes, all this sounds familiar because in essence it's true. And I'll tell you the difference between A Course in Miracles and just about every other spiritual teaching that I have studied is that the Course in Miracles not only speaks truth, but it tells you how to apply it. It gives you the steps to recognize when you know it in your head and you are living it in your heart. Because right now we're being called from talking it to walking it. You got to walk the talk. And so many of us, especially in spiritual circles where we're teachers and healers and coaches, we can talk it, but inside we've been in turmoil, and we're in turmoil because we are not walking it. And the Course in Miracles wants us to walk it so that we realize that, yes, we came from the stars. We are aliens here, and we are here to bring the good news, the truth, the love, the light, that we are meant to be in harmony. This, what humans have created on this planet, because we've been disconnected from our divine self, is a bloody mess. And I'm not even British. I don't know why that came out of me. But anyhow, I channeled my inner British. It's a bloody mess. And we've got to clean it up, and we cannot clean it up by continuing to condemn what we don't like. We've got to, you know, roll our sleeves up and clean it up. But we have to be the change. We got to clean it up inside so that we can move into action. And we didn't get to the action part in this set. So next week we will continue and we will go into that. But thank you so much, John, for being here. Yes, every week we shovel a lot of information. Lorelei or Patricia, anybody else? Or Christo or Vern?
Just
Well,
lots of valuable information. Thank you, Laina.
Thank you, Ms. Lorelei. You've been on my mind lately. I'm going to connect with you later on. Yes, Christo.
yes, I really enjoyed it very much. Such a lot of powerful, the words are so also limiting, and you once got to explain the different meanings of the same word sometimes to get the the impact of choices that one has to look at things, And I was reminded nicely too, Vern, when you mentioned about minimum force, is required. I learned that in chiropractic college many years ago. You need to just find the right minimum force to get the adjustment and the alignment and get the efficiency, and of course later on there was more vibrational forces that we used, which were much lighter forces. So it's very much, I think that's a big part of life, is learning how to become much more efficient as one grows in consciousness and wisdom.
Yes.
And love.
Yeah, absolutely. Because down here, like in the movie The Matrix, we're trying to bend the spoon, but up here there is no spoon. And we don't need force when you're creating, with awareness that you are the one who can shift what's happening. But here we need force the lower we are, because we really believe there is this bad person, but that person is just an aspect of ourselves coming to bring us a lesson. And anyway, so thank you all so much for being here. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Yes, Vern.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a statement. The idea of boundaries and barriers. I used to think I had boundaries until I realized a lot of my life I've had barriers. And there's a big difference between a barrier and a boundary. A barrier is permanent. It just blocks everything. But a good boundary is fluid. In other words, it can move in and move out, open up, shift right, shift left. It has that openness to it. So border many times it's identified many times with a barrier. And I think once we move to the idea of really having healthy boundaries, then we'll have that fluidity, which will allow us to have that natural flow in and out. But it is, we are facing, I think in the next few months, even some major choices that are going to have to be made. I just want to make sure that I'm making that choice and placing my voice in the right place. I want to come from the right place. So and it'll be based on my current best understanding.
Yeah.
And that's all I can do. I'm not trying to get enlightened and then make choices, because you can't wait for that.
And give yourself grace, because if you make a choice,
Choose
from
again.
this place today, tomorrow you choose again. You make a choice from the next day. This is why we have forgiveness. Forgive ourselves for forgetting the higher consciousness when we were in a lower one. It's gentleness, and that gentleness towards ourselves is self-love. And that gentleness, once we learn how to be gentle with ourselves, then you realize, oh, that feels so good. Let me just do that with everybody, no matter who they are. And then you can love everybody, all your exes too. All right, everybody, let's say goodbye. So unmute yourselves, and thank you so much for being here. Love you all so much.
Thank
and
you.
I'll put out the
Bye-bye.
information.
Cheers.
Goodbye.
See you later. Take
Adios.
care.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Hasta luego.
Bye.
Hey, Crystal, where are you physically located at?
I'm here in Atlanta. I'm here with the Laina.